When people hear the word harem, they often think of beautiful women in paintings or stories. But harems were much more than this. A harem was not just the sultan's bedroom. It was like a small country inside a palace. It had its own money system, rules, and even secret spies. A harem was a closed space where only women lived. Only very close male family members could enter. The word comes from old times, but the idea is simple: keep women separate from other men. Harems were not just Islamic. Many people think harems only existed in Islamic countries. This is not true. Harems existed long before Islam began. Kings in ancient Assyria had harems thousands of years ago. In ancient Persia, India, and even Greece, women lived in separate parts of houses. Harems were common in many places: Turkey, Egypt, Iran, Central Asia, India, Morocco, China, and many African countries. Almost half the world had harems at some time. Why did harems exist? There were two main reasons for harems: protection. If girls stayed away from strange men, they were safer. There were many wars and robberies in old times. Keeping women hidden protected them. Control. Harems also gave men complete control over women. Women were seen as valuable. They could have children and continue the family. Like keeping gold in a safe place, men wanted to keep women hidden. This way, they knew the children were truly theirs. Harems were expensive. Only rich and powerful men could have them. The bigger the harem, the more important the man was. How big were harems? Some harems were very big. In China, an emperor could have 20,000 women in his harem. Can you imagine 20,000 women in one place? The Ottoman harem in Turkey had more than 300 rooms. The Sultan's mother, wives, daughters, children, and many servants all lived there. It was like a small city. In Persia, keeping the harem cost almost 2/3 of all the country's money. Harems were very expensive. How girls entered harems. Sisters and daughters were born into harems. Wives who married the ruler also came. The Quran says a man can have up to 4 wives. But most women in harems were not family members or wives. They were concubines and servants. A concubine is a woman who lives with a man but is not his wife. These women did not choose to come to harems. The slave trade. Many girls came from the Caucasus region between the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. People called them Circassian women. They were famous for their beauty. One story says Ibrahim, the mad, drowned several hundred concubines at once because he thought one had been with another man. But some harems were better. Not all harems were terrible. In many harems, life was not so bad. Some women had good lives. Becoming a favorite. The best thing for a girl in a harem was to become the ruler's favorite. There were different ways this could happen. First way, you worked as a servant. The ruler noticed you one day. Congratulations, you were lucky. If he never noticed you, you might work for many years and then be freed and married to someone else. Second way, you were bought to be a possible favorite. You were taught language, manners, how to read stories, and intimate things. You learned religion, history, and literature, so you could talk with the ruler. If he didn't like you, you would be married to some official. Third way, you were a personal gift from the ruler's mother or another relative. This was the best way. The ruler's mother often chose concubines for her son. Getting pregnant. Having a baby was the most important thing for a concubine. If she had a baby boy, everything changed. She got better rooms, servants, and gifts. She might even become the ruler's wife. This was different from Europe. In Europe, a child born outside marriage was a bastard with no rights. But in Eastern harems, if the father accepted the child, a son born to a concubine had the same rights as a son born to a wife. One Moroccan sultan had over 1,000 children. Scientists say this was possible if he had sex every day for 32 years. But having too many babies was a problem. Who would be the next ruler? So harems controlled births carefully. Abortions were common. Sometimes they killed pregnant women. New names and status. If you became a favorite, you got a new name, beautiful names like moon-faced or blooming like a rose. Hurem means cheerful, pleasant, bringing joy. You also got money. An ordinary Ottoman servant got 5 to 6 silver coins per day. The Sultan's wives and mothers got several thousand coins, hundreds of millions of rubles per year in today's money. The Sultan's mother, the most powerful woman. If your son became the next ruler, you became the most powerful woman in the harem. The ruler's mother had the biggest rooms, the most servants, and lived near her son. These women had real power. They owned land and property. They wore jewelry worth crazy amounts of money. Today, some of these women would be on the Forbes list of richest people. The Sultan's mother could go outside the harem, completely covered, of course, with guards and servants. She visited other important women warriors and spies. In the Mughal Empire in India, there was an interesting problem. The harem had strict rules. No men except the emperor could enter. But who would protect the emperor and harem women? The answer? Train women to fight. They taught girls from Kashmir, where women were not kept isolated, to throw spears, shoot bows, and fight with knives. These women warriors were called Urdu Begis. They guarded the emperor and traveled with him everywhere. The best warriors got servants, nice rooms, and some even married into the royal family. Harems also had women who were like spies. They watched everything and told the emperor. They carried notebooks and wrote down everything they saw, not just about concubines, but about the whole family. Music and entertainment. Some women were entertainers. They sang, danced, played music, and read poetry. They were trained in the harem or bought already trained.
In Baghdad in the 900s, one woman from the harem became so important that she ran a court. She wasn't a religious leader, but she ran a civil court where normal people could complain about officials. This was amazing because it was almost 1,000 years before women's rights movements began. Another woman from a harem watched important officials who were under house arrest. She became rich and powerful through her connections. Some women, called kiras in the Ottoman harem, worked as businesswomen. Often these were Jewish merchants' wives. They sold clothes, jewelry, cosmetics, and medicine to harem women. Men couldn't talk directly to harem women, so their wives came to help. These women became very important. They got palace apartments, didn't pay taxes, and sometimes did political work. One famous woman named Esther Handali worked between the Sultan's mother and Venice in the 1400s. She wrote letters, met ambassadors, and traveled to Venice. She became Venice's main representative at the Ottoman court. Eunuchs, men in the harem. Eunuchs were men who had been castrated. Their sex organs were cut off. How did this happen? Sometimes a father did this to his own son. Why would anyone do this terrible thing? Career. The word eunuch originally meant keeper of the bed. Only castrated men could be near the ruler's private rooms. Eunuchs were trusted because they could never have children. They could never steal the throne.
He wanted his son to have a good career as a court eunuch and help the family. But 2 months after the operation, revolution came to China. Imagine the irony. But Sun still served at court for some time. Later, he said he was more sad that during the Cultural Revolution, his family had to throw away the jar with his 3 treasures. Chinese eunuchs kept their cut-off parts their whole lives. They believed in the next life they could be reborn as complete men. Sun Yaoting died in 1996, not long ago at all. Chief eunuch. 4th most important person. In the Ottoman Empire, the chief harem eunuch was called Kislar Aga, chief of girls. By the end of the 1500s, there were more than 1,000 eunuchs in the Ottoman palace. Only dark-skinned eunuchs could guard the harem. Why? Most concubines were white girls from the Balkans, Caucasus, and Eastern Europe. They thought dark-skinned eunuchs were less likely to become close with white concubines. Also, if a concubine got pregnant by a eunuch, the baby's dark skin would show immediately what happened. The chief eunuch was the 4th most important person in the Ottoman Empire, after the Sultan, the top religious leader, and the Grand Vizier, like a prime minister. But often the Sultan asked the eunuch for advice instead of the vizier. The chief eunuch got land, a pension, and became very rich. He managed the harem's contact with the outside world, selected concubines, supplied the palace, and taught the Sultan's children. He also managed religious properties and had money for both becoming rich and gaining political power. Viziers hated this. They worked hard, often through blood and fighting, to get their positions.
They saw the eunuch's power as an insult. They tried to limit the chief eunuch's power, but only succeeded in the mid-1800s. Women's Sultanate. In Ottoman history, there was a time called the Women's Sultanate, when women had all the political power. It started in the first half of the 1500s. That's when the ruler's favorites got the title Hasiki Sultan, like queen. The sultan's mothers were called Valide. These titles showed they were important and close to power. The harem was moved to Topkapi Palace, right next to where the government met. The harem wasn't hidden in the back, it was right next to the center of power. Harem, Roxolana, breaking the rules. The first Haseki Sultan was Harem, also called Roxolana. She was the wife of Suleiman the Magnificent. Before Harem, there was a rule, one concubine, one son.
This was supposed to stop brothers from killing each other for the throne and limit women's power. When a son grew up, he went to govern a province far away. His mother went with him. But Harem broke all these rules. She had 5 sons with Suleiman and never left the palace. She wasn't just a concubine. She was Suleiman's closest political advisor. Some researchers think Harem helped the Ottomans become closer to Poland, where she may have come from. She wrote personal letters to the Polish king. Scientists studied all Ottoman military campaigns over 500 years and found something interesting. If the Sultan's mother was from Europe, there was 70% less chance he would start a war in Europe. So the empire's decisions about war and peace depended on where the Sultan's mother came from. Safiye Sultan, more power. Think Harem's story is amazing? There's more. Safiye Sultan was Sultan Mehmed III's mother. Foreign ambassadors called her Valide Padishah, meaning she could make the Sultan do whatever she wanted. Safiye put her people everywhere: viziers, judges, religious leaders. She used the state money like her personal wallet. She wrote letters to Queen Elizabeth I of England. In one letter she wrote, "God willing, I will do as you wrote. I constantly tell my son the Padishah to act according to the treaty." She was basically saying, "Elizabeth, relax. Everything's under control. My son will do what we agreed. I promise." Some regent mothers sat behind curtains at government meetings with their young sultan sons. They made statements from behind the curtain. Sometimes they came out completely wrapped in black silk, with the chief eunuch fanning them with a huge fan. Wu Zetian, the woman who became emperor. In China, there was an amazing woman named Wu Zetian. She started as a 5th-level concubine. There were 9 concubine levels and many girls at each level. Chinese emperors couldn't remember all the concubines. Legend says they chose partners by looking at paintings. So court artists took bribes from girls to paint them beautifully. Wu Zetian became empress in 655. Her husband, Emperor Gaozhong, was sick and weak. He had bad headaches and poor vision. So Wu Zetian did almost all the state work. When he died, she ruled through her sons as regent. But this wasn't enough. Wu Zetian took the male emperor title and started her own new dynasty. She became the only woman in all Chinese history who formally sat on the throne as emperor. She ruled fully and harshly for 15 years. But there was a terrible price. People believe that when she was still a concubine, Wu Zetian killed her own newborn baby. Why? To make it look like the current empress killed the baby from jealousy. This helped Wu Zetian take the empress's place. Fighting for power. The struggle for power in harems was brutal. Women killed to protect themselves and their children. Al-Khaizuran, the mother who killed her son. The famous caliph Harun al-Rashid from 1001 Nights was a real person. He ruled most of the Middle East in the late 700s. His reign started the Islamic Golden Age. But how did he become caliph? His mother, Al-Khaizuran, was a former slave. She started as a concubine but became a wife. She convinced the caliph to make her sons heirs, even though he already had a firstborn from his legal wife. After her husband died, their eldest son became caliph. Al-Khaizuran continued doing politics, but her son got angry. He wanted to limit his mother's power. Shortly after they argued, the caliph suddenly died. Very convenient. One story says a concubine smothered him with a pillow on his mother's orders. Al-Khaizuran may have killed her own son. Killing brothers. Here's a typical Ottoman story. A sultan dies. His wife or favorite hides the body in a cold basement. She secretly sends a message to their son who governs a province. "Come quickly, the throne is waiting." The son arrives and takes power. He knows if he doesn't clean house, he'll be in danger. Together with his mother, he kills his half-brothers, sons of other concubines and wives. Sultan Mehmed III killed 19 young brothers on his mother's advice. They were told they were going for circumcision, but were strangled with ropes instead. This sounds horrible, but it was normal for that time. After a sultan died, all his sons could claim the throne. To prevent civil wars, the new sultan was allowed to kill rival brothers. Everything was explained as caring for the state. For harem women, fighting for power was fighting for survival, for themselves and their children. Two mothers fighting. Another dangerous situation was when the ruling sultan's mother fought with his favorite wife who had a possible heir. The mother was still in charge, but felt her power slipping. The younger woman was in second place, but her ambitions grew daily. This was a battle between two generations of mothers. Innocent children became victims. Safia Sultan, who wrote to Elizabeth I, had her own grandson executed. His mother was executed too, and 30 concubines belonging to the prince were drowned in the Bosphorus. Kösem Sultan's death. Kösem Sultan was one of the most powerful women in Ottoman history. She was the only one called grandmother of the Sultan. She became regent for her 8-year-old grandson. But the boy's mother also wanted power. It was her son. The two women began a cold war.
They plotted against each other. Kosum decided to strike first. She would remove the boy and put another grandson on the throne, one whose mother she could control. The plan was to poison the boy with sherbet, a drink. But servants didn't dare do it. The conspiracy was discovered. Kosum's enemies went to the Sultan and said, "Grandmother is dangerous. You must do something." They found Kosum in the palace and strangled her. Strangling was the chosen method because dynasty blood was sacred. It couldn't be spilled. But strangling with a rope, scarf, or even hair was acceptable. The end of harems. In January 1873, Egypt's viceroy married his distant relative Emine. Emine was the daughter of a concubine. But Emine didn't have to share her husband with other women. The viceroy became Egypt's first ruler to completely give up slave concubines and polygamy. Emine was his only wife. He even closed the harem quarters in the palace. Change was coming. But Emine still had servant slaves. She still sat behind a screen at official events. She could meet female guests personally, but male guests were greeted by the chief eunuch. Newspapers didn't even print her name. Only in 1923 did she allow her photograph to be published. A few years after this wedding, Egypt banned importing slaves. The Ottoman Empire also began prohibiting the slave trade in the second half of the 1800s. Of course, people found ways around these bans at first. But gradually, harems became impossible to maintain. Court harems finally collapsed when the empires themselves fell. What happened to the women? After the Ottoman Empire ended, the last Sultan, Mehmed VI, left the country. His 5 wives and staff stayed in Istanbul. For 2 years, they lived under house arrest in a palace. There was no luxury. They were starving. Then the new government said there was no money for harems and told them to leave the country. 3 wives joined the Sultan in Italy. When he died, 2 of them remarried. This type of remarriage is what we consider modern, but it was actually typical for many former concubines. Some women became prostitutes.
Some returned to their parents, if they were still alive and could be found. They survived however they could. There were even charity organizations to help former harem residents. The Egyptian ruler's wife gave pensions to former slaves, servants, and eunuchs. Harem buildings became museums. Now tourists visit instead of concubines. But harems didn't disappear everywhere. In Yemen, Oman, and Saudi Arabia, until the 1960s, you could still buy a concubine, mainly Chinese and Ethiopian women. The price was about $400 to $500, 500,000 rubles today. In Morocco, the royal harem with concubines was officially closed only in the late 1990s. Harems today? What's called a court harem today, King Mswati III of Eswatini, a small country in southern Africa, has ruled for almost 40 years. He has 16 wives and more than 30 children. But there are no forbidden palace sections and no eunuchs. His wives take photos and go out freely. But many women today are not so lucky. According to the UN, more than 22 million women live in forced marriages. Most are in Southeast Asia and Arab countries. Another 5 million women are in sexual slavery. Sex trafficking makes more than $100 billion every year. People are traded on all continents. Modern female slaves often come from Eastern Europe and Africa, and are taken to EU countries, Turkey, and Persian Gulf states. Love in harems. But harems weren't only about slavery, sex, power, and money. This is also a story about love. Empire rulers were ready to do anything for women they loved. It didn't matter what these women's backgrounds were, because feelings can overcome any traditions. For many women, the harem was a prison, even if the cage had golden bars. Many ended up there against their will. But this was also an institution where women without freedom gained new power. Within a harsh system, they created alliances, art, and conspiracies. Today, people say we need to rethink how we see harems. Not bring them back, rethink them. A harem wasn't just an exotic place or torture chamber. It was part of a patriarchal order, yes, but also a female space where girls survived, created, and built careers. If the palace was power's face, the harem was its heart, closed, quiet, but alive. And exactly there, in those closed rooms, the fates of entire empires were decided. What do you find most interesting about how harems?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.